I love the Singapore Grand Prix. It's like my favorite street track. And this one, kind of disappointing actually, but we've got some stuff to talk about. Ammar, you ready?
I am ready.
Let's go. Guess what? Lando just dominated the Singapore Grand Prix, won by nearly 30 seconds. I'm wrong, right? I've totally got this wrong. Have you baked my humble pie?
Well, I am your pie is baking. I haven't forgotten that, and I have pinned your tweet, the infamous tweet. So for those of you who don't know, Shez does the shakedown with Cameron's F1 podcast, and on there he said that he would eat humble pie if Lando ends up winning the championship. Something thereabouts. For my money, Shez, I think that we got to start baking that pie now because it sure as hell seems like that's going to be the outcome here soon.
Oh man, humble is my like least favorite fruit. I'm not going to enjoy this pie at all. But tell me, what say you, Amara? How has Lando proved me wrong?
Well, I think it's not necessarily proving you wrong. I think, in all fairness to you, you've asked for a more dominant champion, and I've argued with you that you're asking for a Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Senna, whoever else you want to kind of add in there, Prost kind of champion in there. That somebody that makes you feel like, they actually grabbed the championship by the horns. And I'm here to tell you that this is just that kind of season. This season, man. Nobody thought up until Miami that, and he maybe even there soon thereafter that McLaren would have any shot at being this dominant. And what Singapore showed you is that they are just in the hands of Lando. They're just further ahead, man. And I know Oscar got that victory in Baku, but that wasn't the same thing. And by the way, that was all aided by the mini DRS that just sort of went away. I saw, so there's a little bit of that there. But what Lando
Sure.
put together, really from the start of the weekend throughout was just dominant all over. And if not for that cheeky Red Bull strategy, he would have gotten every point that's on the table. But I mean, he looked great, Chaz, and I think that's so. This is the thing. We can make the argument about the math of it. And I know that he actually did. I mean, Max actually kind of widened his lead slightly, right? If you look at what Lando needs to do on average for the next few races, just
It's
by
52 points now,
yeah,
isn't it?
you're right. It is that. But I think what you're seeing is, I mean, when something like this builds up, right? We're now reaching that tipping point, and this tipping point really is on Red Bull, not so much McLaren. And I think that in a month from now, we're going to find out really quickly if Red Bull are going to be able to defend. It doesn't really look like it. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. So I'm here to tell you that humble pie is getting baked, and whether you like it or not, you're gonna have to eat it in some way, shape, or form. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get it to you somehow.
Right. Well, I'm still expecting that oven to be off, despite this result. Couple of things about this. Like first of all, I think Lando did a great job. Like he was on it from like FP1 onwards. I think he joked in McLaren's little interview afterwards that the only session that he didn't top this weekend was FP2, and he was slightly disappointed about that. Well, ha ha ha, Lando. Maybe. And actually qualifying, he was 2 tenths up over his closest competitor, who was Max in the end. Uh, Probably even then could have gone a bit quicker in Q1, but I'm not going to hold it, not in Q1, in Sector 1. I'm not going to hold that against him. There's people that are arguing that he had two sort of near misses during the race. Again, that's meh. It doesn't matter. He was so far ahead, and actually, even when those mistakes happened, he didn't bin it in the wall, and he carried on driving an exemplary race afterwards. So to take points off him for that, I think is probably a little churlish. So no, I think Lando had a great weekend this weekend, absolutely brilliant weekend. But there's a pattern here again, right? When the car is super dominant in high downforce on high downforce tracks, Lando can do this. He did it in Zandvoort. Okay, he messed it up off the line there, and still wasn't able to lead the first lap. But we had that, and then we had four races where what the heck happened? we were having to talk about team orders. We were having to talk about Oscar needing to give him a hand. We were having to talk about, why is Oscar trying to race Lando? We were having to talk about, is Lando still not aggressive enough when it comes to the rules? We saw Oscar winning a race in the last race. So where was the Lando we saw in Singapore for the last 4 races? Right. And that's my worry with him, is that if this is a harbinger of everything that's to come, and that if even in situations where a spanner is thrown in the works, that he can still find a way to get round that and still win the race, which is what a driver like Max or Fernando or Lewis would do, then I'd say, yeah, fair enough. But
okay, but again,
but saying that he's suddenly
but
made it on the back of one race result and ignoring everything that's come before, I think is a little premature.
okay, 2 things. One, again, you keep
Sure.
bringing Max and Lewis and Seb and whoever, and I'm here to tell you that Lando can be a one-time champion only, and he may not be relevant. I mean, he even said that he wouldn't compare himself to Lewis or Max or anyone. We're not talking about putting him in the pantheon
We
of the
should come
greatest of
back to
ever.
that as
So
well,
we
because
can come back
that's
to
a
that
problem too.
when his career is over, but let him get his first championship. There are many ways to get there, and this is one way. And oh, by the way, I think and my second point here is to your point of like, yes, there was this dominance in Zandvoort, and there was a 2 or 3 race lull, and then we're back again. Ches, you can pick up the season for any of the championship contenders and say just that. I mean, in fact, we keep talking about Lando winning this championship on the heels of, but look, if Max is going to defend this, I don't see a victory in sight. Like, this would also be, by some stretch of an imagination, a very weak championship on his part. Not to take anything away from him, because he has given dominant. Yes, because now if you just keep doing the math on this, by the way, Max was bailed out by the Ferraris. Looking at Charles's race pace, he definitely was right that he could have fought for a race win. He definitely would have been on the podium. I think we can say that unequivocally. For whatever the hell happened in Q3, which is again some part classic Ferrari, some part maybe Charles' mistake, the tires being weird, and he was not the only one complaining about it. Just except for that oddity, I think Max got bailed out because he wouldn't have even finished that. And we at some point we'll talk about Mercedes too. They screwed the pooch on this too, because they could have easily beaten Max. So I think in some ways you can argue now.
They could.
Well, he could have been behind Oscar. No, I mean it could have happened. Look, my point is, if you pick up any of the championship contenders and any of the teams, we have gone through these stretches where we're saying, "Oh my God, what's going on?" They were doing so well. Mercedes is a great example of that, but Red Bull is an example of just that, Shez. And Nico Rosberg put voice to this. There are people within Red Bull that are afraid of what McLaren just did here. And this is a sign of things to come, in that McLaren is so dominant, and Red Bull, without your guy, Adrian Newey, have no answers. Have zero answers. So this is not a question of whether Lando is great or not. It may not even matter.
Yeah,
it just may not.
You're talking about ifs, buts, and maybes, and we know what Max thinks about ifs and buts.
But it's not ifs, buts. This has happened.
Ferrari didn't put their cars into a position to beat Max.
Exactly.
Max did the job he needed to do by pulling out an exceptional lap.
Absolutely.
In Q3. And
it's only a matter of time.
And then executing a perfect race. So yes, on a weekend where Lando was super dominant, he could not have done any more. Max absolutely maximized what his car was capable of.
Correct.
On a weekend where he really needed to.
Absolutely.
And I would argue that championships are won on your bad days, on the days when you cannot win, not on the days that you can win. And if you're going to talk about dominant performances, Max has managed to win races, both in a dominant fashion this season and in races where he should not have been anywhere near the top step. Imola, he should not have won that race. Absolutely should not have won that race. And he probably shouldn't even have come second in Silverstone. And yet there he was, trouncing a McLaren that was tangibly faster than he was. So yes, you can put some of Max's wins and some of Max's better results down to McLaren screwing the pooch, as it were. But he still has to be able to do the thing that he needs to do. And that is what Lando has not been
Yeah,
able to do
but
every single
I
time.
think
Any tiny obstacle
this
is
is
put
not.
in front of him, he manages to fluff it up.
Yeah, but okay, well, so okay, yeah, we'll have to come back at the end of the year to kind of do the full analysis. So give him at least, let's give him the grace of these next 6 races plus the 2 sprints. Like let's at least do that and come back, because this is a
If
season where they arrived, McLaren as a team arrived in Miami with such dominance, and Red Bull have fallen off the cliff. No one predicted this. So we have to at least give him that kind of grace. That's all I'm asking. And what I'm complaining about
I
with you is no, but okay, fair enough. Not your position, but at least mine. But what I'm complaining about is we are putting him, by you bringing up again Max and Lewis and all these dominant contenders as an example.
not
You're
dominant, not
putting him
dominant.
on a
Just
you're
I
putting
don't
him
mean
on a
dominant.
pedestal. These are multiple champions. Let's pick up one-time champions and then
Yeah.
let's talk about it. That's probably a better
Okay,
way to do it.
so that actually for me is a problem. Okay, and I'll give you two
Okay, it is a
examples of
problem, but it can be a championship though.
I'll give you an example of two one-time world champions, but also the mindset is absolutely wrong. My mate Baxty made the point that when Lando was in the press conference after qualifying, he said it's an honor to be up here with people like Lewis and Max. He's not a driver that's in his first or second season in Formula One. He's been here since 2019. He's earned the right to be there. So why is he in awe of the driving talent sitting next to him? That's not the mentality of a champion, right? Like he
I
should be up
disagree
there
with.
going,
I
I
have a
should
different take on that,
absolutely
but yeah.
be there. My second thing is about not dominant champions, but champions that have won just one championship. Nico Rosberg is a great example of this. Like he took absolutely every opportunity that came his way in 2016. He took all of the bad fortune that befell Lewis Hamilton, and he could have done a Lando and despite having all those opportunities, still fallen behind, but he didn't. He did everything he needed to do. He shut himself off in a hotel room. He stopped talking to his family. He did everything he needed to do to make sure that he was going to win that championship and make every point, every second count. And that is what Lando is not doing right now. He's not taking the opportunities when they come to him. Like messing up off the start line. Yes, you could say, well, this is something that's McLaren are new to this and Lando is new to this. I get that, but if he doesn't get another opportunity to win a title, those things are going to bite him in the butt. And the things that, can you imagine Max Verstappen making that kind of error off the front row multiple times in 2021? He didn't. That was his first championship attempt, wasn't it? He didn't make those errors. So why are we holding Lando to a different standard?
We are not. You're comparing apples and oranges. No two situations are the same. When Red Bull were competing in 21, they were slowly building up to it. They were already there. They had McLaren's coming out of the dumpster fire, man. Since 2008, they have been nothing but relevant, right? So no two teams, no two drivers are in the same situation. What you talked about initially with Lando commenting that he feels like it's an honor to be with two champions on his side and be competing with them. I take nothing from that other than that's something that's said in a press. So I believe nothing that says in a press, because what you get from most Formula One drivers is a bleached, starched PR version of saying things that mean nothing. I mean, every time Lewis is asked a question, he will take this moment and you watch, he'll say, and then he'll make something up. I don't care what they say, because I don't expect them to. Their job is not to convince us in the press or whatever. And by the way, Lando just has a different personality. That's just all it is. Maybe he's just there enjoying Formula One. He's enjoying race wins, and he'll get there. If he gets there, he gets there. He doesn't get there, no big deal. No one would have thought anything. You, for one, will be happy because Max will still be a world champion, and he would have won it the right way, right? So what is the harm in that?
Well, only because of how Lando has performed over the course of this season. If it'd been a different Lando, if he'd stepped up his game this year and
He
done
has.
something
He
different
did.
and made
But he
himself
had a
look
brilliant
like a
weekend.
champion,
But we can't say that on the
one
heels of
weekend.
this weekend. Okay, fine.
One
Okay,
weekend.
but that's what I'm saying. Save all of this until the end of the year. This criticism can come in. Let's not do it real time. Let's not make him a world champion and then say, oh, you're not behaving like one. Let him earn it. It's fine. He's doing all the right things, Shez. And I don't know if the outcome is what it is. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. We know that championships take a lot of grit, a lot of strategy, a lot of smart decisions, some mistakes, and some luck as well. So there is an element of that involved. And all I'm trying to say is there's a glass half full, glass half empty. If I were Red Bull, I would be very afraid now because they have the potential to beat Max on their own. They don't
But
even need Ferrari.
but
They just need Oscar to be better. And on this weekend, we could have criticized his performance because, good God, he was not there
but
anywhere, nowhere to be seen.
That's a good segue. Let's talk about Oscar, because I know you have a lot to say about the man. Go for it.
No, I don't have a lot to say other than, I mean, where was he? I mean, oh my God, last week, oh, second coming of whoever, man. He's a future champion, blah, 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 blah. See, we do this thing again. We do the prisoner of the moment stuff. We put them on a pedestal. And now that he had a lackluster weekend, no one is out here criticizing. And I just think, well, first of all, you address the mini DRS, and that stuff cannot be underrated because I went back and watched all the 40 odd laps that Charles was behind Oscar. Yes, brilliant defending, but also aided well, very well aided. That extra 4 kph or whatever it was from the mini DRS is all it took to put his car that way. Had he not had that, or maybe even had even 2 kph less, Charles would have been able to overtake him. He would have done it in turn 1. It's just that. So I'm not here to take anything away from Oscar because he did everything brilliantly. It's not on him that McLaren have a mini DRS. But this is the thing. On this weekend, McLaren needed him to be there right besides Lando, and he was nowhere in qualifying. How far behind did he qualify? Shez was like a half a second, because I know it was 4/10 to Max, so I think it had to be right around half a second. I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
Where was he? Where was he? Where is all of this? Where is all of this? And are we not going to be critical of him now? Why not?
No, I'm absolutely happy to be critical of him. Oscar made a mistake in Q3, and actually he was a step behind Lando this entire weekend. I'm not gonna sit here and say that he was the better McLaren driver, and it was a twist of fate. But he also didn't disgrace himself either. In the race, made a good start.
Aided by Mercedes.
Oh yeah, sure, but we'll have to talk about Mercedes because they were in the wrong position. They qualified in the wrong place. Oscar definitely should have out-qualified both Mercs. So
he was not even ahead of them. I mean, what does that say?
That's definitely on him. He definitely should have been ahead of them. But in the race, well, he fell behind Nico Hülkenberg, but put a good pass on him lap 1 straight away, no messing around. And when the opportunities came to overtake.
He did get overtaken by Nico Hülkenberg. Like I'm just out here to point. Like, but when he makes the move on Lando, we're all like, "Oh my great!" But okay, I'm just saying. Which is be fair. I'm sounding like a Lando. I've taken many defensive positions on drivers.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yes, Oscar got taken by Nico Hülkenberg off the line, but I think it's the first time that's happened to him this season. Yeah. This season, that's the first time he's been overtaken off the grid. But in terms of how he raced from there on in, he was classic Oscar. He did all the stuff that he normally does. He was actually pretty quick. He overtook Hülkenberg when he needed to overtake him, important pass. And then when he needed to overtake the Mercedes, he did that as well. He got past Lewis and George, both of them around the outside of turn 4, really incisive passes. You could argue, why was he not catching Max in the final stint? Well, Max was running on the hard tyre and was quicker in that final stint and running about the same pace that Lando was running in that final stint. So actually the performance of those two cars equalized a little bit in that final stint. So actually the advantage that Oscar had in the first stint was no longer there in the final stint, though I don't think he could have done much more than he could have done. Where the mistake was in Q3. So yeah, if we're arguing about where the mistake was, that's where it was. One error in Q3 messed up his entire weekend, unfortunately. But he was not alone in that, unfortunately, this weekend. But I'm not going to sit here and defend him particularly. You're right, he should have done better. And Lando did a great job. But one swallow doth not make a summer, as this saying goes.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just here to say that when I step back now and look at, we talk about Oscar being championship material. Hungary was and Baku is no longer the
What?
stellar thing that it can be.
Why was Hungary air?
Isn't that the one where Lando had to give up the position to him? Isn't that the
Yeah,
one?
the one where Lando was
Yeah.
undercut in front of him
Yeah,
by
well,
his
I mean,
team.
but he was, yeah, he I mean, all the emotional pleas, good God, like if there's an indictment to be put on Oscar, that's what you got to do. Just put the radio
It wasn't
messages
Oscar. It wasn't
from.
Oscar pleading for it.
Well, no, but
Oscar,
if
in
he was
fact,
fast enough, he
Oscar, in
could have
fact, just
caught
sat there
up.
and just.
He couldn't, but Ches, he couldn't even. He was like
But
7 seconds behind.
Lando couldn't catch him when he was behind Oscar.
But
There
he
was
was
a clear
his
dirty air
race
problem
engineer.
there.
Oh, but his race engineer. Oh, okay, fine. We don't have to relitigate that. I'm just here to say
Anyway,
that for me, that's we just have to peg
I'm sorry,
everything down a little bit, like not that great.
that's not a good argument. But anyway, can we talk about the front wing very quickly? This is a quick, really quick
Let's do it.
segment.
We have to do that.
So last week was the rear wing. This week, I think the front wing was the thing that really gave McLaren their pace, or at least that was the differentiator for me. And F1 in their utmost wisdom kept doing the front wing shot, and it was really interesting to see what the McLaren was doing on the straights and in the corners versus what the Ferrari was doing in the straights versus in the corners. Because on the straights, the McLaren front wing was flat. You could see where the elements were lining up, and then as soon as they hit a corner, the elements were not lining up anymore, and it was going back to its high downforce setting. And we know, this is what I talked about in our previous video on the rear wing, that the reason to do that is that it allows the car to have a better balance. It allows the car to bite and have less understeer in slow corners, and yet retain a stable, non-loose rear end in faster corners. Perfect for the Singapore Grand Prix, and it absolutely was the bedrock, I think, for Lando's performance this weekend. He made the absolute most of it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that front wing is definitely an advantage, and it will be interesting to see what the FIA come up with when they finish their video review at the
I
end of the season.
I thought
I barter it will probably be nothing.
I had my suspicion the second we heard news that McLaren was going to, change its rear wing, and that to me was like a classic, a bait and switch kind of thing where they were having everyone focus on the rear wing while the front wing is the one that's doing all the damage all along. So this is, man, but you got to love it on some level, right? This is Formula One ingenuity at its best, right? Unless
Yeah, I love it.
you're
Yeah,
in the Red Bull camp, and to some extent you're in the Ferrari camp, but mostly in the Red Bull camp.
yeah,
You
yeah,
gotta love this kind of cheeky bit of like cat and mouse game, because again, by the time they got caught with the rear wing, the damage was done. By the time
yeah, absolutely.
they have to make these changes behind the scenes with the front wing.
Yeah,
That's also going to be
yeah,
gone.
I think messing with the front wing and the aero elasticity of that front wing will ruin the championship.
Yeah.
Just mark my words. I think it's a bad move. Right. Let's move on. We've probably got about 15 minutes. Let's talk about Daniel Ricciardo.
Oof.
I think we'll talk about Daniel Ricciardo and whether this was his last race a bit later in the week, because I think that his standing as a driver and where he ranks is probably worth a video in and of itself. So we've got some time, so we might come back to that.
We might have
But
news
what I
by
do
then
want to,
too. So yeah.
yeah, indeed. But what I do want to talk about is how Lando ended up not getting the fastest lap. What
Yeah,
happened?
that's BS, man. I think it's BS. And again, I'm not a Lando Norris fan, nor am I cheering on McLaren in this case, but it just doesn't feel right, right? Much like, there have been races that I don't want to relitigate stuff, but it just doesn't feel right. As the viewer, you feel like this was something cheeky that was being done that just doesn't deserve being there. Now I get why they did that with Daniel. I suppose they could have done it with Checo, although Checo was having a bad day himself too. So what would that have meant? Nothing really. I don't like it. I don't like it. And I don't think this is on the teams, right? I think there should be a rule that if you're not in the top 10, or if you're not in a, I guess, in a point scoring position, which is the same thing basically, is then you just don't get the fastest lap. It shouldn't count for anything. Why?
Well, it
Why?
doesn't. It doesn't count for
No, no,
anything.
but
He
just
doesn't get a point for it.
give the point to the previous guy. Just don't count the lap at all as a fastest lap. Just don't. Much like it's like, much like you would do it for cutting across, right? Or for going, like, just delete the lap time. It doesn't matter. Don't do
Yeah,
that.
well, I take your point, but then if Lando gets the point for fastest lap when he hasn't actually got the fastest
No,
lap,
just I'm saying don't anyone that is P11 through P20, if they set a fastest lap, it does not count. Just think of it
Why?
as if they've cut a corner. It's it does not count. It should not count.
Why?
Period.
Why?
Because it doesn't make sense. You're just what are you doing it for at that point?
Well, because you've got a fastest lap. Like, okay, so
What value does that have?
none, but that's a different argument. We should come to that because I think it's relevant. But there's two things I wanted to talk about with Daniel Ricciardo and that fastest lap. The first is about whether or not the fastest lap is actually worth a point. Like, is the problem here that there is a point for fastest lap? Like,
Yes.
is it even necessary? Yes.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So you're arguing the same thing I am, but in reverse, basically. Are you saying just
Well,
eliminate the
right. I'm
point?
just saying, just get rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah, just get
And
okay.
I'm
It's the
not
same thing.
arguing. I'm
Okay,
not
fine, fair enough.
arguing for it. I'm not arguing for it. I'm just saying, if we're going to say that, if somebody outside the top 10 gets fastest lap, then the fastest lap within the top 10 gets the point. I think defeats the object, because if you're in the top 10 and you don't have the fastest lap, but you get a point for fastest lap, that I think is a complete joke. And how the hell
It is a
would you be able
complete
to
joke.
justify
Yeah,
that?
I agree with you. So yeah,
In which case,
you
just
made
get
my
rid of the fastest lap point.
no, you made my stance better. You just get rid of the point for the fastest lap. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I agree with
And
you.
I think if you're going to do that, then fine. I think as the rule stands, I don't have a big problem with what RB did. I think, actually it's using all of the tools at your disposal, which is what Formula One teams have been doing for eons. Like, how many times have we seen a back marker with the same engine as a front running team being asked to move aside and then block the McLaren driver behind? Sorry, I didn't mean to make that so pointed, but it happened in the 90s all the time. This is how
Oh, come
Michael
on.
Schumacher was Moses.
That's your defense.
He was just allowed to pass straight through. So I don't really have a problem with it. I think that, this is just Formula One teams being Formula One teams. They played a game and they get the results. This is more on the FIA. If they don't want this to happen, then get rid of the rule. But I have to say, I quite enjoyed it. So I quite liked that Red Bull said, right, well, Lando's going to get the fastest lap. How do we take it off him? Well, we've got this team back there, and we've got Daniel Ricciardo, and we've got a really good alibi for why we give him fastest lap. So let's just use it, and we'll deny Lando that lap. And that has helped them a lot, hasn't it? Because now by taking that solitary point off of Lando Norris, Max Verstappen only has to finish second to Lando for the rest of the season, including sprints, and he'll still win the championship by 1 point. So that's kind of job done, isn't it?
No, it is job done, and I think
I quite like it. I think it's very clever.
Would you have felt the same way if they did that with Checo?
Yeah, I'd say it was necessary, but it wouldn't be as clever.
I think that this is a multifaceted thing, right? It cuts on so many different levels. There is the point itself, which you just explained. There's the fact, I guess, that Daniel Ricciardo is leaving. I mean, certainly does seem that way. Like this, good God, it's like if he ain't getting buried, like why the hell are we having a eulogy already? Like this is. I don't understand. Like, why couldn't they just tell us that he's retiring, or he's not going to continue, so he could have at least had a farewell? They could have done donuts or something for him in Singapore. Like, good God, like what the hell is that all about?
Just so the MBS can say we're not allowed
this
to
is
have
the worst thing.
Daniel got to go do some community service.
It's the worst thing. Oh man, yeah, I would have just done a bleep 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 bleep. Like I would have just.
What if Daniel Ricciardo basically did donuts in the shape of the F word?
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
that is great.
So good.
That would be great. I mean, then I would hire him back. Like, I'd find a way to put him on another team right away. It's
Ken
so
Block reincarnated.
indeed. I think the cheeky thing about all this is they did it with Daniel, and they confirmed two things already. One, that he's leaving. I mean, I don't know that there's like a worse way of not saying anything without saying everything, right? And then it's just the emotion of that. So we can't even debate this properly because it's he might be leaving.
It's
Henceforth, that
unofficial.
it's unofficial. It's
Absolutely.
unofficial, but he might be leaving. I mean, Laura
Totally.
Mackie was just saying like this might be
No,
like
it might be
Laura.
his last
Are
race.
you? What are you doing there? Are you not team
But
principal? You have
the
no
thing is,
say
though,
there.
the thing is that when Laurent Mekies says it, you know that he has like zero authority and zero knowledge, so he may actually not know.
Oh, it's a shit show, man. So that's what this. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to do community
Ooh.
service. Whatever. But I think this brings up the idea of having the second team. No, that's what this is all
Okay,
about, really.
so we did a video 6 months ago, in fact.
Yeah, six.
Cast your minds back to March, and we did a video that they're still on there. We'll put a link to it at the end of this one, where Zach Brown was making a big deal out of the fact that A and B teams should not exist. Like, it's not fair for one organization to own two separate teams. And that was coming off the back of the fact that, number one, the V carb that came out at the beginning of the season in preseason testing looked quite a lot like the RB19. And second, that we had heard that essentially V carb had moved their campus from Faenza to Milton Keynes, essentially. So all of them, like Haas, were sitting in Milton Keynes. So we argued, I think, at that point that yes, it's not fair for one organization to own two teams, but where the conundrum comes is, how do you force Red Bull to sell their team? And I think you had argued, well, there's lots of antitrust laws in the US that forbid that kind of monopoly, and I get that, but those are laws that are outside of F1. F1 operates in its own little bubble. But I think the solution that we ultimately came to was that they're writing a new Concord agreement for 2026 to just put an ultimatum to Red Bull at that point, that this is the rule. The law is you cannot own two teams as one organization. You either sell off RB or they're not a Formula One team anymore, and you lose all the jobs, all the facilities, blah.
Red Bull would be smart to do that right now because there's no better time to sell a team than right now. Yeah, I think it's I think I thought it was fascinating, right? And the fact that Daniel did this and it came at Lando's expense brought out all kinds of memes too,
No,
which
it's
is both
brilliant.
funny and it's slightly under the belt too for Lando fans. But look, I think on its face, it's okay for teams to do that. As you mentioned, this is an FIA thing, and good God, if the FIA would focus on stuff like this instead of what drivers say on their radio, that would make for a little better fan experience. No, it's something I could easily explain to my kids when they're watching the races with me.
Who can? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think fundamentally it's not right for Red Bull GmbH to own Red Bull and
Yeah,
RB, because like the IP transfer and the
there's
potential
no
to
way to
share a
police it,
budget gap.
Chaz. There's no way to
Yeah,
police it.
it's just too
You can't
difficult.
do it. You
And
can't.
yeah, and the fact that it's Red Bull, the team that constantly are on the edge of the law, is frankly no surprise to me. But anyway, that's I think where we stand. I don't think either of us agree that it's the right thing. The solution, I'm not sure, is quite as straightforward. But there you go. We've offered our solution to the FIA again, and we've done it without swearing very much. So come on, give us a shout. All right, last thing, just for the last sort of 5-6 minutes. Mercedes, what the hell happened?
You tell me. They're your team, no?
They're not my team, but so the way I see it is that they overperformed in qualifying, right? Lewis finally got ahead of George, put his car on in third. Decent lap, man. Not bad lap at all. But they should not have been there, because absolutely your team should have been right up there. If Carlos, the
Smooth
the
operator.
dependable, the smooth operator, the smart guy, the guy that knows how to make his car work, didn't punt it
So
off on his outlap.
Man, Shez, as a Ferrari fan, I'm used to like I knew walking into this weekend, like I just knew when I was watching qualifying, I knew there was going to be something that would happen. And when I watched the race, I knew it was going to be. I mean, good God, the race
And
turned out to be better
mate,
than.
listen. I'm not going to lie. If Chuck had managed to get the car, if they'd been able to warm
He
up
could
their
have been
tires
P3,
for
P4. Yeah, easy.
on the grid, he could have won that
He could
race,
have
man.
won the
Like
race.
his pace at times
Yes.
when he wasn't bottled up behind Alonso and Hulkenberg was leading pace. It was Lando pace.
The front row should have been Lando and Charles. That's how this should have been because they were the two drivers who deserved to be there.
Absolutely.
Carlos should have been ahead of the two Mercedes. So in my mind, your two cars overqualified in part because of some of the mistakes behind them. And in large part due to Lewis Hamilton doing what Lewis Hamilton does, which is he just pulls off stellar laps like these.
Great lap. But then he goes out and for some inexplicable reason, he's on softs to start with, when none of the other front runners are. And to compound that, despite him still having life in those tires, he comes in earlier than anybody other than Carlos Sainz. And yes, he undercuts a few people and makes a few good passes, but then he's an absolute sitting duck to everybody else. And I saw a article. In fact, it was a quote from Gary Anderson during the live feed on the race, saying that the comment that Lewis made, I think he said at the beginning of the second stint, have we pitted earlier than everybody else? And Bono said to him, not the earliest, but we are one of the earliest, and it will give us options later. Gary Anderson's comment to that was, that's the kind of comment you say when you're not in the pre-race briefings. And I think, although I still don't believe it, it brings up all those questions about, are Mercedes sabotaging Lewis Hamilton again? Look, I'm going to give you my take on it. You tell me what you think as well. I'm totally open to whatever view you have. I find it very difficult to believe that Lewis would not have had a say in what tyres he starts on, and that he wouldn't have had access to the Pirelli information that the entire team and the entire grid have access to. He's not the kind of driver that ignores that kind of information, so he would have known about it. So I think that move was a joint move. I think perhaps bringing him in earlier than he expected was maybe slightly unexpected, and that was a mistake. But I can understand in the instance of, in the heat of the moment, why they would have made that decision. This is the first ever Singapore Grand Prix where there has been no safety car and no yellow flag. So he probably would have expected that at some point early in the race there would have been a safety car that would have made that soft tire gamble work out for him. And second, they were gambling that he would have made a good start on the softs and overtaken at least Max or Lando. And he did have a good shot at Max. But in hindsight, yes, it was a bad move. Would I have done it? No. It didn't make sense to have your lead driver on a weird strategy that nobody else is doing. And bringing him in early was also sub-optimal. And finally, just before I hear what you have to say, because I'm sure you've got some stuff, I think the Merc, just from a general point of view, was always going to slip backwards. They were lucky that Charles caught George at the time that he did without enough laps, because I think George was probably going to get overtaken as well. That car was not fast enough, and George did a good job defending, but in all honesty, Charles should have been ahead of George at the end of the race, right? That was not on pure pace that George ended up there. That car was slow. And probably the bigger question that Mercedes needs to ask themselves is not, why did we put Lewis on a funky strategy? It's, where the heck is our pace gone? Anyway, that's what I think.
Can I ask you a quick question? Did we hear anything from Toto Wolff post-race about the strategy call?
Yeah.
Do you recall what it was?
Yeah, he said exactly that. After apologizing that his two drivers had heat stroke, he said, "Look, we were banking on a safety car because we looked at historical data, and we looked at historical, not data, but historical uh, Singapore Grand Prix. And although this season we've had now 8 races where we haven't had a safety car, actually Singapore historically there has never been a Singapore Grand Prix where there has not been a safety car. Number one, and number two, they put him on the red wall tire because they thought that it would give him a jump at the start. So they needed both those things to work to make that strategy work, and neither of those things happened, so it didn't work."
Okay. So, I mean, we can talk about who gets blamed for it, but I think that the Mercedes strategy team should be ashamed of themselves. This was a bad call, and you knew it the second you saw that. Like even before the race started,
Yeah, it was
and
weird.
and
Yeah,
I
it was
had
odd.
and I think they made that call earlier in the day. Whatever it was, it is the dumbest call I've seen here, Shez, because the first thing here, the two things that stand out. Your strategy by doing that is hoping for a safety car, which is a negative strategy to have in the first place. Second, and related to that is, why are you
We talked
doing
about
that?
that.
Why do you need to do that? Why do you need that? Who were you going to jump and you were actually thinking about winning the race? No, you weren't going to win the race. You knew that. You knew that you qualified, overqualified. You knew that Lando was way ahead, man. He was in a different zip code, and there was no catching Max also because Max is Max. So Lewis qualified third and fourth. Their aim should have been how can we be on the podium and then see what happens in front of us. Like, I don't have a problem with having a weird strategy and offset strategy, but if your strategy is, good God, we're going to put our lead driver on the softs and hope for a safety car in the first 10 laps, that doesn't make any sense at all. Because even if you were going to jump, there's a good chance that those two drivers that were ahead of you were going to get you back. So your race is not with them to begin with. You can do this thing if you start P9, P10 or P10, P11, something like that, or maybe even somewhere in the middle. It makes sense to do that because then you say, okay, well, we can jump the Haas of Nico Hulkenberg or whatever. I thought Ferrari should have done something like that with Charles because he was stuck in a bit of a DRS train. That would have been a good strategy to have. But evidently, even if they didn't decide to do that, and you can know that already. So their game should have been, Mercedes' game should have been all along, how can we secure one podium place? And then let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. It didn't make any sense, Chess. It wouldn't have made sense to put
Yeah.
your lead driver on that.
Yeah,
It just made no
I mean, I
sense.
think, yeah, I can't disagree with you on any of those points. I think you're right. I
They
think
just
it
look
was a bad move.
lousy. They look
Yeah,
lousy
they
on a
did.
weekend where they could have been opportunistic. They could have had one driver on the podium.
Yeah. Where I will push back on anyone outside of this conversation is I don't think it was sabotage. I don't think it was a
No, I don't think
conspiracy.
it's that. I don't think
It's
it's
none of
that.
that. It
No, no,
doesn't
no.
make any
It's not that.
sense to do that.
That's silly.
And I also don't think he would have got a podium at the end of it. I mean, as good as his race
But
pace is, I think Oscar probably would have got past him
fair enough,
at
but
some
they could
point.
have at least defended. They would have been in the
Yeah,
mix for it.
yeah,
And if you wanted to go
yeah.
offset, I could have argued maybe put one of them on hard tire, let them go
Hard
longer.
tires.
That
Yeah,
would have made more sense because
yeah,
now if you have a safety car too, the others are probably
yeah.
pitting. You could get maybe George could have gone ahead. He could have like there are different ways.
Yeah, but
So I
also
don't
you're on
understand
the
what they were doing there.
I listen. I agree with you.
This
I
makes
think
no sense.
doing the offset in that sense probably would have made more sense. You wouldn't have had a lot of grip at the beginning, but you would have been on the medium tire when
Correct.
the track is at its absolute best,
Exactly.
and had a
It
chance
could
of
have
taking
had a
some
long
wiggle.
run, and
Yeah,
then
it
if
was.
there's a later safety car too, who knows what that looks like. So
Yeah,
it was pretty underwhelming. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know what
yeah.
they were
I think
doing. And
it's
again, you were in a position, Mercedes was to want to defend from the guys behind. You're not trying to jump the guys ahead. That ain't happening. Like, in what world are you thinking that
yeah.
that would happen? Unless Max and Lando got into it, on the first couple of turns, it wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't. So
Yeah.
you knew right away. And then the very fact that, I mean, I would have left Lewis out there even longer. Like I would have tried to have him go at least 20 laps, if not longer, right? Like, and like, okay,
Yeah,
whatever it is, you struggle
and
now,
let
take the pain right
George
now. Yeah.
and let George past.
Yes, of course. I mean, by doing that already, what sense does it make? Shez, within 2 laps, you could hear George Russell on the radio saying he needs to go fast.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
spells the end of it. That's the end of it. And you don't have
yeah,
a B team here to cause a safety car collision. Oops, I said that. But you just don't have anything. Like, what sense does it make? Let George pass, let him get ahead. It's
yeah.
gone, man. And I don't understand. And look, Lewis has to bear some responsibility of this because he's a smart guy, man. He's a 7-time champion. He's raced, I think this was what, 350 races, whatever
50,
it
yeah,
is, right?
yeah.
Whatever. Like he can't step up and say no. So it sounded like, and I don't know, again, I was not in the briefing room or when they're making these strategies. It sounded like he agreed to the strategy without actually fully feeling it. Like that's because he said something to the effect of, "Oh, I don't know why I agreed to this," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have the exact words or the exact quote, but it just makes no sense, Shez. It just does. They just look lousy all around, and they gave up points. They really did. They really did.
Yeah, yeah. Don't disagree with that. And I think on that slightly limp
Agreeable stance.
we're going to have to end this one. But that was our race review. Let us know what you think. Lando, is this it? Has he done everything he needs to do? Are you Team Ammar or Team Shez? Let us know.
Oh my God.
We've got a 3-4 week break coming up. Keep watching us. We're gonna get into MBS and swearing. Is Max gonna leave? Daniel Ricciardo, seats coming up, and a few surprise topics as well. So keep watching, keep liking, keep subscribing, please. Keep leaving us comments. We read all of them and we respond to as many as we possibly can. And we will see you guys shortly.
Sleep it.